Hey everyone, this is Mike, and today I'm going to be doing the level 80 overview of Ninja. Ninja was my very first max level character when I first started playing the game, so I might be a little bit biased towards this job. But I do think that in Stormblood they nailed quite a few things well. They gave us quite a lot of quality of life changes towards how some of your mudras work, towards how your Ninkey works, stuff like that. But unfortunately enough, some of those changes also came with some bad consequences, mainly the fact that we're now double weaving quite a lot, and since Ninja is one of the few jobs that has a attack speed buff, it means that double weaving will clip our GCD, and since we're double weaving so often now, because of some changes that they have made, it can feel a bit clunky from time to time. Now today they rolled out a little buff which buffed Ninja's DPS by quite a bit, because Ninja was the melee of all of the melee DPS that was underperforming quite a lot, mainly in its personal DPS regard, but they did patch this, so I am thinking that Ninja is going to be quite up there right now, seeing of how of the calculations that were already be done. So seeing in the next few days how they're going to be doing with people raiding on it and such, I have a good feeling about Ninja. Now the bigger change to Ninja is probably going to be coming in 5.1, patch that will also have the next ultimate in it and all of that stuff. So if Ninja is going to undergo some kind of a bigger change to address some of these clipping issues, then it'll probably happen in 5.1, and if it were to be the case, then I'll make a follow-up video when that happens. Now Ninja revolves around two main mechanics. They have their ninjutsus and they have their Ninkey. Ninjutsus are kind of like the hand gestures that ninjas make, and depending on what gesture you make, you create a different spell. In this game we basically have three mudra buttons which represent these hand gestures, and depending on the combination in which you press these buttons, you will create a different ninjutsu. Our Ninkey is a lot easier. You generate it by just hitting the boss with the GCDs, and then once you have enough gauge, you can spend it on one of three abilities. Its normal rotation is also relatively simple. It's probably one of the easiest rotations because it is very free flow. Not free flow in the same sense as Monk, where they can choose how to use their GCDs, like through their stances, but it basically revolves around keeping up two buffs, I guess I'll just call them. You have your Shadow Fang, which is your dot, and you have Huton, which is your attack speed buff. But in between all of that, you have a lot of freedom of what you want to do with your GCDs, because as long as you have your Huton not drop to 0, which it is a 70-second buff, so you have a lot of leniency there, there's a lot of play that you can do with your GCDs in between all of that. So let's take a closer look at the Ninja. First of all, I'm gonna apply my Huton buff so that I'm not hitting my dummy for way too long, and I'll show off their rotations real quick. So as you can see over here, this buff right here is our Huton buff. This you basically want to keep it at all times. So let's start off with our first combo. We have Shadow Fang, which is a 1-2 combo, and as you can see, it applies a 24-second damage over time effect. As I said, this you basically want to keep this up at all times, but there will be moments where you will be clipping into this slightly, so meaning that there's still a few seconds left on this buff. I believe if there's 9 seconds left on it, then it's already worth using Shadow Fang again or something like that. So as long as there's 9 seconds or less, it was worth using, so to speak. Then second buff that we have, or second combo that we have, is Aeolian Edge. This is executed from the back, the last attack of the combo string, to get the most damage out of it. This is just your damage filler. And your other 1, 2, 3 is Armor Crush. This one, the final hit you want to execute from the back. Now, the reason why Ninja is so free flow is because all of your abilities, or all your combos, start with the same hit. And then you choose, do I want to go for a full combo, or do I need to reapply Shadow Fang? So I'll do Shadow Fang because it dropped off. Then you do your 1, your 2, and then here you need to decide, do I want to use Aeolian Edge for damage, or do I want to use Armor Crush for the attack speed buff? So since my Armor Crush, or my Huton is dropping low, I can use Armor Crush, and now it has a lot more, but as soon as you drop below 40 seconds on this, you can use Armor Crush and still not overcap, since Armor Crush increases the duration by 30 seconds, meaning that as soon as you drop below 40, you can use Armor Crush to extend the buff without overcapping on its duration. So in general, use Shadow Fang first, and then on the next 3 combos, you're going to be using Aeolian Edge and Armor Crush just use Aeolian Edge in general, and then once this bar drops below 40, that's when you can use Armor Crash. So that's all of its GCDs. It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Now, as you can see, we also have a 100 gauge over here, which is our Ninkey gauge. And as you can see, our 3 Ninkey abilities are glowing. I'm going to use the simple ones first. So for single target, we have Bava Kakra. This just does single target damage. And I'm quickly gonna generate some extra Ninkey. We have 80 again. Then we have our AoE version, which is Health Rock Medium. This is a pretty big AoE, so this will hit a lot of enemies if you're AoEing. And then last but not least, we also have our last one. This is our level 80 skill, which is called Bunshin. I'm gonna see if I can get enough gauge for it. When you use this, you create a shadow clone that will execute the same attacks that you are doing, but it doesn't matter what attacks that you are using, if that makes sense. So every time that you execute an attack, the only thing that your Bunshin shadow clone cares about, if it's a single target attack, a ranged attack, or an AoE attack, meaning that your ranged attack is just like you're throwing daggers, and then all of your normal GCDs, or if you are doing your AoE. This is what your AoE looks like, by the way. You use your Death Blossom into Hake Mujin Setsu. This second hit will extend your Huton. Well, mine already dropped, so you don't see this, and well, both of them will of course generate Ninkey as well. So when I use my Bunshin, you'll see that I have a shadow clone executing all the same actions that I am doing. Again, it doesn't matter what actions that you're using, because they'll just do damage depending on the type of action that you used. Now let's talk about our mudras and our ninjutsus, because this is where ninja gets complicated, or at least when you start playing it, because once you've played it for a while, ninja, it really isn't, like, remembering all of these really isn't too bad. So the way it works is these 3 buttons right here, my Tenchi engine, or my mudras, and then we have the button ninjutsu here, which will change depending on the mudras that I have pressed. So I'm gonna press some mudras and you'll see that this changes. So I press 1, turns into Shuriken. I press a second one, now it turns into Raiton. And I press the third one, now it turns into Huton. And then when I use my ninjutsu, it'll execute that ability. And the Huton is my attack speed buff, so that's why I used it. Now there are quite a few different abilities that we have. So I'm gonna go over here. When you hover over these abilities, it will also show you the mudra combination at the bottom of the tooltip. As you can see, for Shuriken you can use any of the 3 and then use your ninjutsu. For Katon it's either Chi into 10 or Chin into 10. This is more important when it comes to using Tenchi Jin, which is a different skill, which I'll talk about in a second. But yeah, so basically that's how you can see all of the different combinations on how to get these ninjutsus. So let's talk about them real quick. Fuma Shuriken is a single target ability which does low damage. So in general, we're not going to be using this as soon as we unlock our second mudra as you're leveling up. This is pretty useless at the moment because of how damage scaling works. So this one, don't think about it. In 99.999% of the cases, you're not going to be using this. Katon is our AoE ability. You can use this as soon as there are 2 targets. So this is really good for AoEing. Raiton, this is the single target one that we are going to be using. So you start with Shuriken, and then once you get your second mudra, you can start using Raiton. This is our filler one as well, so if we do not need to apply Suiton, this one, for our trick attack, we're going to be using this. Hyoton is not used outside of PvP, because it's a bind and it does very low damage. Now later when we get a trait at level 76, this does become useful, but I'll talk about that in just a second. Huton, as I talked about, this is incredibly important because this is our attack speed buff, so you always want to have this up at all times. When you do not have armor crash, which is at level 54, you need to use this in the middle of a fight. Normally, when you go into a fight, you apply this before you start the fight, and then you keep it up during the fight with armor crash. But as so long as you're not level 54, you're going to need to manually reapply this by using your ninjutsus for it. Doton is another skill that we don't really use all that much. Katon, this is an AoE puddle that you drop on the floor, and it's a damage over time effect for everything that stands inside of it. but the problem is that Katon is usually a damage increase over this, because the enemies need to stay inside this puddle. So if, for example, you're doing a trash pull, but there's AoEs happening and the tank needs to move around a lot, then they're usually going to drag the mobs outside of the Doton, meaning that using this isn't really that worth. On a boss, it can be useful using this with your Tenchi Jin, but again, on the you need to make sure that the boss stays inside the puddle or it's not worth using. Suiton. This one is incredibly important as it does two things for you. One, well, you can do two things with the buff that it gives you. So it gives you the Suiton buff, which lasts for 20 seconds, which you can do two things with. First of all, which is the most important thing, is it allows you to use Trick Attack. Trick Attack is your damage up buff, and it increases the damage that the mob takes by 10% for 10 seconds, and it's on a 1 minute cooldown. Meaning that you have incredibly high uptime of this, and 10% is really high of a damage increase as well, especially considering that it is all types of damage. If you take a look at Monk, that is only 5% and for only physical damage dealers. Red Mage is also only for physical damage dealers, and it's a drop off from like 10% I believe and downwards. So this being 10% and for everyone is incredibly strong, also because it's on a 60-second cooldown. This is the shortest raid buff that is in the game, meaning that a lot of people also plan their rotations around Trick Attack because it is so strong. So use Suiton whenever your Trick Attack comes off cooldown, and then use this as soon as it's up, as this is incredibly strong to buff the rest of your party. Now at level 76 we get a trait for Kassatsu, which is Enhanced Kassatsu, and it allows you to execute these two abilities. Goka is basically a stronger Katon, and Hyosho is a stronger Hyoton. Now, the way how this works, and I'm gonna quickly show this. So if I use my ninjutsus, they go on a 20-second cooldown. As long as you're in a fight, you can't reset these. If I go outside of combat real quick, I can use hide, which makes you go into stealth, to reset the cooldown of these. So at the start of a fight, you basically use Huton, hide, resets the cooldown, and then you can, for example, use your Suiton to open up the fight, so that you can have access to your Trick Attack. Now, this again makes them go on cooldown, of course, because you use a ninjutsu, but when you use Katon, it resets the cooldown of your ninjutsu and grants you the Katon buff, meaning that the next ninjutsu that you use is going to do increased damage. But not only that, at level 76, this means that your ninjutsu is also going to have an extra effect if you use either your Hyoton or your Katon. So if you use Hyoton, you can see like you have all these shurikens flying around, which is the Hyosho. If you used Katon, it will turn into Goka. So that's kind of how your Kassatsu works. You use this to make the next ninjutsu do more damage, and then once you're at level 76, you can also use it to execute either Goka or Hyosho, because they do a lot more damage. Now, since Kassatsu is 60 seconds, it means that it will always line up with your Trick Attack, meaning that you can always get one of those strong ninjutsus inside of your Trick Attack as well. So that's kind of how your ninjutsus work. Now we have one last skill that interacts with our ninjutsus, and which is Tenchi Jin. This can be kind of tricky to learn because you need to learn mainly two different patterns, I guess you could say. The only two ways that you use Tenchi Jin is either for AoE damage or for single target damage. The AoE version will basically make you use Shuriken into Katon into Doton. So this is really good for when you're in dungeons and you're doing like a trash pull of like 10 different mobs or something. This is really strong. Ninja's AoE damage is incredibly high when you use these kind of things. And then for the single target version, you have Shuriken into Raiton into Suiton, meaning that you could use it to set up Trick Attack if Trick Attack was to come up together with your Tenchi Jin. But if it's not up with your Tenchi Jin, you can still use the Suiton buff on Meisui. So normally, when we went back to Stormblood, you basically didn't really want Tenchi Jin with its Suiton variant, because if you didn't use it to set up Trick Attack, because you're basically wasting your Suiton buff. But since Stormblood Shadowbringers introduced Meisui, we can now also use that Suiton buff on a Meisui if Trick Attack is not ready. So I'm going to spend my Ninkey real quick, and I'll show this. So if we use are sweet on, and now I have my sweet on buff, and I can use my trick attack, for example. So there we go, trick attack's used, sweet on buff is gone, and then I use my Tenchi Jin, which resets all of my mudra abilities, and you can only use mudras whilst you are inside of this. And I was too slow because it only lasts for like 10 seconds or something. But basically what it does is it resets all of your mudras, and then it allows you to use 3 different mudra skills in quick succession. So this is why you're going to cycle through your 3 different mudras, because you're going like Fuma into right on into sweet on, and then it ends the mudra chain, so to speak. So I'm quickly just gonna apply my sweet on again, manually this time. So you can see I have my sweet on buff, and now I can use Meisui. When you use Meisui, you get 40 Ninkey gauge. There's one more way to generate Ninkey with abilities, which is by using Mug. When you use Mug, you also get 40 gauge. So this is something you can use at the start of a fight to immediately get your Bunshin running, so that you can go into your burst phase, and then of course through the fight as well, you can use that to get more Ninkey abilities going. So that's how your Ninkey generation works. Like usually it's through just using GCDs. As you can see, it's going up by 8 every time that I use a GCD ability, and then you can use Mug whenever it's ready, and then you can use your Sweet On and then apply use it on Meisui. Now it is not worth using Sweet On to use Meisui in most cases, but in general what you do is you just use Right On, which looks like this, just the 1-2, and then you have like some lightning that strikes down. But then when your Tenchi Jin is up, you can go Fuma, Right On, Sweet On, and then if you don't need the Sweet On for trick attack, you just eat the buff with Meisui to get enough to execute another Ninkey ability. Now, the way trick attack works, I'm gonna run away real quick to reset my aggro, so you can see what you kind of need to do during a trick attack window. So, we're gonna apply the Huton buff. We're gonna hide, because this resets our cooldown. You can do this before a pull, or in between like a dungeon pull or something. You can quickly reapply Huton if need be. But during trick attack, we're gonna do a few things. So first of all, we're gonna use trick attack. After this, we wanna use our Katon, or Kasatsu, and then use a Hyosho, because we wanna get the stronger attack in. But other than that, we're also going to use Dream Within a Dream, which is just an off GCD. And this will give us Assassinate ready, which during this buff we can use Assassinate. So that's the 3 things that you want to do during each trick attack. You trick, you use Dream Within a Dream, which combos into Assassinate, you want to use Kasatsu, and then you use your Ninjutsu on the Hyosho Ryanryu. So that's what you want to do every trick attack. Of course, some trick attacks will look a bit different, especially the one at the start of the fight. Because you'll also have 2 Kasatsu charges ready, because this has a maximum of 2 charges. So this will look a bit different, but if you want to see like the opener, you can scroll back to the beginning of the video where I am doing that one. So yeah, trick attack is pretty busy. You're usually going to have 1 double weave. I usually like weaving Kasatsu together with Dream Within a Dream, because otherwise if you have extra off GCDs to use in that trick attack, you might not have time for all of them. So it usually has you double weave once, and then it double weave the Hyosho Ryanryu. So that is that. Now there are, I think, let me see, there is one more ability that we kind of want to talk about, which is Tsukuchi. So all of the other melees and some tanks, and the tanks as well, they have a gap closer. Now Ninja does not have a gap closer, they have a movement ability, which is your Tsukuchi. Now this thing does not do damage, so you can use it or save it specifically for damage, and it's also not a gap closer because you can use it wherever you want. So if I'm gonna go to the beach real quick, I can just jump wherever I want, wherever I can target it, as long as I stay within the range of it. Now this has a 1 minute cooldown, so you can't use it that much, you would say, but if we use something like, for example, a Right-On, you'll see that I am now granted a charge. And since Right-On is our filler ninjutsu, you'll get these charges back very quickly. Like basically every minute you're gonna get your 2 charges back, and then another charge from it, like normally cooling down in between that minute. You can also macro it, like for example, I'm going to show the macro real quick. It looks like this, Sukuchi to target. This will have you teleport to the target that you are targeting at the moment, so you don't even need to look, and you just bam, jump to it. This can be very useful if you don't want to like go through the hassle of clicking it, pointing, and then clicking with your mouse to like jump there. So that's what you could do, to just press the button and bam, jump to it. Macros are pretty finicky in this game though, so it's a bit meh, but it is something that you could use. And that's pretty much all of Ninja's abilities. So in general, we're going to be using Huton to start of the fight to get the attack speed buff going. Then we keep this attack speed buff up by using Armor Crush. With your general GCD rotation, make sure that Shadow Fang is up. You use Armor Crush when this bar drops below 40, and then you use Aeolian Edge all of the other times that you're doing your combos. When it comes to your ninjutsus, you're always going to be using your Raiton. Whenever your trick attack is up, we want to use our Tenchi Jin, which goes into Sweet On, so that we can use our trick attack. During the trick attack, we want to use our Dream Within a Dream, our Katon, and then our Assassinate, and then we use our Katon on Hyosho Ryanryu. And then when stuff like our Bunshin is up, we want to be using our Bunshin to get the maximum damage out of that. So yeah, that's kind of Ninja. It's really busy to play. There's a lot of buttons to press, a lot of different buttons to press. But I really like these high APM jobs. As I said, there is a lot of clipping involved, because as you can see, whenever I'm using my double weave ninjutsu, I am clipping on my GCD, and then when we go into trick attack and I double weave the Kasatsu and the Dream Within a Dream, that's where I am double weaving as well. So it feels a little bit bad, but I am pretty sure that they are going to change this aspect of the ninja. So where it falls into a raid group, I guess you could say, its personal DPS output is not super high, but it does make up for that with trick attack to boost the rest of the party. So being able to use your Sweet On, either through hard casting the Sweet On like this, or by using your Tenchi Jin and then using your trick attack, is really important. Again, if you have Tenchi Jin up and you use it, but trick attack's not ready, use Meisui so that you can get some extra gauge from using that Sweet On. And that's pretty much Ninja. It's probably the hardest melee to play. It's also the most active melee to play. So if you're somebody that likes a little bit more of a complicated job, then Ninja is probably the one for you. I wouldn't necessarily say it's the most complicated job in the game, but it might be. Maybe Summoner is a little bit more complicated, I'm not entirely sure. But once you do understand how all of these ninjutsus work and how all the rotation flows together, it is definitely very rewarding to play, especially now that they boosted its personal DPS as well. You're also going to be seeing some of the numbers reflect all of the effort that you're putting into your rotation as well. Again, as I said, in 5.1, they're most likely going to be doing a slight adjustment to Ninja, mostly to address these clipping problems that they have. But when that does happen, I'll be sure to make an update video to exactly explain all of the things that they changed. So that's Ninja. It's really fun to play. I'm definitely going to be playing around with this a lot more now, since their DPS is also a lot better now, so it doesn't feel as bad to bring to raid, because like before it might be kind of feeling like you're not bringing as much DPS as, for example, a Monk or a Dragoon would be able to do. But right now it definitely feels like it will do a lot more. So yeah, I'm definitely going to be trying it out a bit more, maybe have some videos on the channel later of some extreme primals or something, I don't know. But yeah, that's Ninja. It's really fun, it's really active. You have your cool ninjutsus and Ninkey abilities, it looks amazing, and definitely recommend people to try it out and give it a try, and then see what 5.1 has to bring for the Ninja. So with all of that being said, I want to thank you for watching. If you have any more questions about Ninja, feel free to ask them in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.